Good afternoon, evening, night, morning, wherever you find a way to watch this podcast. It's Omar. I'm back after kind of a long hiatus in the off season. I mean, it's kind of been a boring off season. Things haven't really picked up, but we're close. It's about 6 weeks till the season starts. 5 weeks if your team's playing in week zero, 5 or 6 weeks, whatever. But anyway, I'm joined by an old friend of the podcast, an old guest. We have Cuthbert Hutton of the Last of the Hard podcast and also the account runner of SSN Army Sideline Sports Network. And we talked earlier in the spring and had, honestly, just a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. And I was glad to have him back again.
What a terrible time to take a drink of water. Thank you so much
Sorry.
for having me back, Omar. I love being on. I refer to it in my show notes as the Burger Pod. Being the pauper yourself. But thank you so much for having me back. I'm always happy to talk any kind of Army sports, especially Army football, and I'm happy to be here.
No, thanks for being here. And I might want to change the podcast to the Popper Pod at this point. I know you always mention the Twitter username, and it just started with a dumb joke from a friend. But I enjoy it. I'm never one to give myself a nickname, but it's just funny. But yeah, I'm just glad to have something to talk about because as we get there's like some parts of the college football offseason. I'm not just saying the football offseason because there really is no football offseason nowadays. Like there is football 365 days a year, indoor, outdoors, you name it. But you're like kind of like searching for crumbs of college football news that like applies to your team. And like we got a crumb to feast on last week where there was a network designation for our opening week game against Louisiana Monroe. And it's like I have mixed reactions about this because the game will be a primetime game on NFL Network. And if you mention NFL Network to Army fans, they're like, or the game that was on NFL Network last year, I'm getting uneasy just talking about it, kind of fidgety, but I'll just leave it at that. You get those type of reactions from Army fans when you talk about the game that was on NFL Network against Troy last year. But I have kind of like mixed thoughts on this, Cuthbert. I want to know your thoughts, and then I'll share mine.
Well, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Anytime you have national television, especially for a primetime game, I think that's really, really great. This is not a home game for Army, so we don't have the television rights. I will always choose noon on CBS Sports. I love that as a place to watch Army. I love the noon starts. It's really kind of become part of my fandom that those are our games. It's the first game of the day. It's always nationally televised when we're at home, and I absolutely love it. So the fact that we're going to be on TV is definitely a win for me. Uh, I think probably the big discussion is would it be more beneficial for Army, or would it look better, or would it look better on us as a program if we were on ESPN Plus? Um, and I mean, I don't know enough about the specifics. I've got a little bit of information here about viewership totals and who's watching games and things like that. Um, Personally, I would rather have a game that's on a television station than a game that I'm going to be streaming through an app because I have no other choices. That's just me personally. I know that the NFL Network is not the home of college football. I know that we're probably not going to be getting as many sort of casual viewers flipping around and they go, oh, NFL Network, what's this? Because, you know, typically that time of night, as far as I know, they're playing the Chiefs versus the Vikings from '07. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they play. So I understand the criticisms of the NFL Network not being the premier stage that we would hope it would be, but I'd rather watch it on a nationally televised television station than have to watch it on an app, because apps never work that well on TVs, and I don't want to watch it on my phone.
Hey, I think you got the wrong TV, to be honest with you, Cuthbert. I was visiting my family last weekend, and I was able to I guess like Chromecast the Google Docs presentation or Google Sheets presentation or not Sheets, sorry. So wrong Google app, Google Slides presentation, pitching our family summer day trip, so just like clicking to my computer. But
It's moments like this that I realize how much older than you I am, because none of that meant anything to me. That's gibberish. I don't know what any of that is, but I am sure that you're being truthful in what you're talking about.
Yeah, I did not mean to put it that way, but yeah, like but yeah, like I mean, I agree definitely for sure, and it's like not that NFL Network is like a bad like network. Like there's definitely worse broadcast partners, and I mean, like you can just look at like Conference USA, like being on beIN Sports, which Army made like a couple appearances on in like the late 2010s, where I mean that channel was even harder like to get than NFL Network was, I believe, because it started like they're at first like an international channel. They're like trying to step in the USA. So there are definitely worse places to be than NFL Network, which like that isn't like
100%.
really like yeah, like that's not like really the heart of my problem. The heart of my problem, this decision is like how this game got passed on like the worst dish at the Thanksgiving dinner. Cause like this, it's been over a month since the initial selections for like the first 3 4 weeks, if you count week zero, first 3 or 4 weeks of the season have been announced, and Army ULM went without a TV partner for a long time. Like, I mean, it was one of like a couple games that went without a TV network designation for so long. And for me, I wouldn't say it's like concerning as an Army fan as much as it is like disappointing that like not even, ESPN Plus would want to pick that one up, or the Sun Belt would want to designate that one for ESPN Plus, being that it's Army, it's a national brand. I mean, maybe it's not so much an indictment on Army's brand as much as it is Louisiana Monroe. I mean, a program that really um they're not a bad program at all. I really think they're trending up with I think Terry Bowden's the right guy for the job. I mean, he turned around Akron. He had Akron beat a Big Ten team for the first time since before the McKinley administration. Like they hadn't beaten a MAC team since the 19th century. So or a Big Ten team since 19th century. So I think they're trending upward, but I just think, only one bowl appearance in over almost 30 years being an FBS program. I think it might be a statement to them, but even still,
Well,
like
I mean, ULM, and I don't say this to imply that Army is a juggernaut in terms of our fandom. I'm definitely not saying that. But I mean, ULM, look, they're in the Fun Belt, and the Fun Belt can be a lot of fun, but they're not one of the premier programs within the conference, at least in terms of their notoriety. On top of which, you've got Army, who's coming off. Look, it was a 6-6 season, and we beat Navy, and so I'm always glass half full. But if we had finished last year at 10-2, or something crazy happens, we finish 11-1, or even 9-3, and it wasn't a little bit of a step down year, I think this game very easily could have gotten more consideration. I think Army's viewership and the sort of prominence of the program, it's really tied to the success of the program in a year to year sort of cycle, more so than a lot of other teams. I think of Army fans as being like destination fans. So if you are going to be watching the game, if you're an Army fan, you're going to find the game wherever it is, and you're going to watch it, and the Army fans are going to show up. There's not a lot of us. I understand that, but it's very different than, say, a large state school that has broad support because the University of Florida is a brand in Florida, or Virginia Tech is a brand in Virginia, or name any other large, primarily Power Five schools. So if Army does particularly well the preceding year, I think the ratings are probably going to be up the following year. I don't think that we as a program have the ability to just ride momentum, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, because our fans are, they're not local fans. They're destination fans, as I like to call them.
yeah, and I agree. I mean, that point on destination fans, when I do my tier rankings, the Army's opponents this season, for my channel, I actually like this game. I wouldn't say a lot, but I like this game a good amount, enough to give it kind of like, like I guess more than a passing grade because it's really close to Fort Polk where we have a lot of Army personnel. So like, I mean, honestly, like I'm just glad that they get to play in that part of the country. But I mean, that beyond that, like that's about I guess that's like the only like luster of this game, in my opinion. Like, and that's a good point too. Like, just about like the destination fans too, because you mentioned that like 2018 season. seems like an eternity away now with so much uncertainty now in college football. Like we might be looking at that as like the last like great Army season, with everything considered with happening in college football. It's like harder to compete in the age of NIL, harder to compete as independent, harder to recruit when you tell kids that like, hey, like you probably will not ever get to play have a chance to play for the 12-team playoff. But that's another more Barry Goldwater-esque scare tactic podcast to talk about.
Well, and there's also still a lot of question marks about the new offense. Again, I'm a glass half full guy. I'm a Kool-Aid drinker. So I wished Brent Davis the best of luck with his departure. And I think that Drew Thatcher coming in as the co-OC is going to be, hey, we're going to be putting up 70 points a game, and we're gonna stick it to LSU and Baton Rouge. I mean, I don't know how well any of that's actually going to go. That's just kind of the way that I think of it. So I think Army as a program, they're really hamstrung by all the things you were just mentioning about the lack of NIL, the seeming, at least at present, lack of ability to move on to the next level. And then, of course, with the offensive rule changes and the inability to run the under center triple option that we have been running, that we were able to get success on, we're just going to have to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So I mean, I think yeah, all those factors like do play into TV viewership and like TV attractiveness, which is why this game was, just like passed on per se. Also too, I think another problem I have is it is not Army's fault. It's just like people don't watch the NFL Network games. And like the example that I put in like the piece I wrote earlier this week, which you can find in the link. I have to use every YouTuber does stuff like this. It's like
Tip of the hat, man. You broke the story.
yeah, I mean, I didn't break anything. I just provided analysis that like no one was providing at the time. But
100%.
I appreciate the credit. But like no one watches these games. Like I guarantee you ask even the most diehard college football fan if they knew that I guess the record for points in a game combined with two teams was broken last year, they'd probably say no, because that game was on NFL Network on primetime, competing with Notre Dame versus Clemson, like the same weekend that Notre Dame knocked off Clemson on primetime on NBC. I competed directly with that game, so it received like no viewership numbers because there weren't enough viewers to calculate, and it didn't receive a Nielsen rating. That's the same thing for most of these games. Like Army, like people just don't watch these games, so it's kind of like, I mean, I guess a dead end type of game unless like you really want to watch the game. So I mean, maybe it's like a perceptional thing, I guess. Like I
Well, I
probably
think I think for college football, um, you know, the the market is very saturated. So we've got, what is it, 130, 133 FBS teams, give or take.
yeah.
So, if you're a fan of East Carolina or of San Diego State or of, any number of other G5 schools, just like Army, you are supported by destination fans. I mean, there is a small cadre of people. I'm thinking about, say, the Sickos Committee on Twitter, who are going to stay up to watch Fresno State play Hawaii, but that's not your run-of-the-mill college football fan. And so what you have is you have your massive programs in the Power Five who are your that have those local fans I was talking about earlier, as opposed to just destination fans. And then you have all the big games. And so if you are whatever, Duke, and you start the season hot and you end up going 8-0, and you find yourself a top 12 ranked, team, you're going to get a big stage because somebody who doesn't care anything about Duke football might go, hey, well, we got number 12 Duke against number whatever 4 Clemson. This is a game worth watching. And I just kind of think that's the way the market has shifted. So, at a certain point, anybody who's not a big Power Five, we're all kind of fighting for the crumbs anyway. And listen, glass half full or not, I'm just happy we're going to be on national television.
No, that definitely is a great way to look at it too. And like I'll also add that glass where it's like for Army fans itself, who well, of course will be the main audience of this game along with ULM fans. Like they won't have to subscribe to ESPN Plus for like a month. They'll already most likely have a cable subscription, cable slash YouTube TV, Hulu Live Sports, whatever you have that has CBS Sports Network that in all likelihood also has NFL Network in its channel group. So that I mean that that caters to the main audience as well. So it's good there. But again, like for me, holding out hope is Army because Army loves to. I mean, constantly in the arguments is like we talked before about Army being an independent is, oh, we're a national program. We like playing a national schedule. Well, it's like moves like these, like where they play on NFL Network instead of say ESPN Plus, kind of hurts. Like it kind of hurts that goal to be a national program. And like I'm not saying that Army is on the level of like Notre Dame as an independent. Like I'm definitely not claiming that, but it's like for the casual fan, like you mentioned before, like flipping around, it's like they see like a really high scoring, like say like ULM Army's like 48-45, like at the start of the fourth quarter. It's an entertaining game week one, but it's like you can't really like flip to that and like have that on like the second TV or like have it like on your split screen if like you don't subscribe to like a $80 TV subscription. So as opposed to just like most college football fans will have ESPN Plus, with because that's most of the group of five anyway for a low price. But
I think Army is, in terms of its fandom, if you are not an Army fan already, I think it's a school that probably holds a little bit of an underdog status for a lot of fans across the country. And I mean, I'm speaking in very broad terms here. So, don't get in the comments and hold me to any of this. But I would wager that if you were to ask a random college football fan, would you rather see Army win or rather see Army lose? You're probably more likely to get people say, Army? Yeah, 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 Army, good for them. I mean, without trying to degrade the team that I love so much, in a lot of ways, we are sort of the little engine that could. And so I think just having visibility on a national scale and having national television is good. I think that so much of our viewership is dependent on how we are doing at that very moment that, in the meantime, I'm just glad I'm not dropping $50 for Oklahoma pay-per-view like I had to, 5 years ago. I mean, the worst case scenario for me is we go back to whatever year it was, I think 2019. Army's playing Western Kentucky on Stadium Sports. That the only way I was able to get is I happened to own a Samsung TV so that I could go to the free internet TV stations, and somewhere in between the 24-hour Baywatch marathon station and the 24-hour Impractical Jokers marathon station is Stadium Sports. And that is the bottom of the barrel for me personally. So I at least appreciate that while the NFL Network is not thought of or looked to as a home of college football, I can at least say to friends and family and other people, oh yeah, the game's on NFL Network. And everybody's heard of NFL Network. And if they want to watch, they can find it. I know plenty of people, you say, oh, the game's on ESPN Plus, and then they're thumbing through, oh, well, it's Charlotte against, whatever, Wyoming, and not to disparage those schools, but I appreciate at least being able to go, yeah, NFL Network. Everybody's heard of it. Everybody knows how to find it. You want to watch the game? Watch the game.
no, I mean, that's a good point. Accessibility and ease of access is definitely key as well. Honestly, I forgot about that 2019 Army West Kentucky game because like that for me, I remember like watching that. I was in the city that weekend. I remember watching that on the subway and just thinking something is seriously wrong this year. Like this year is not going to end out like that was the first time that I
This is
thought that
not going well.
I thought like, yeah, I'm like, this year is not gonna end up like the way that I think it's gonna end. And so, I mean, you just brought back a met like I hadn't thought about that game honestly since it ended. So in over 3 years, I had not thought about us playing them in 3 years. But yeah, like ease of access is definitely huge, honestly. Like it definitely helps a lot where it's like, yeah, like there is definitely a clutter of games on ESPN Plus and it can be hard to find. So I guess as well too, and sort of that, I guess it's not really advertising, but more like the word of mouth of telling people like, hey, this game's on NFL Network. that helps gain a broader audience too, where it's like even then too, like say I guess like casual fan, you see Army versus ULM on, the TV at Buffalo Wild Wings on a college football Saturday. Like that's honestly great exposure too, as well. Like having it on, on a sports bar TV and having that ability to have that happen.
Well, the only concern I have about NFL Network is that unless you're seeking it out because you are devoted to a team like Army, the only people watching are, yeah, it's going to be on the ninth of 12 TVs in Buffalo Wild Wings, which is good. Or, maybe at a convalescent home, somebody's left the TV on, NFL Network. But, when you're a team like Army, you know, I'm not sure what else you can hope for, because unless we start rolling out 11-win seasons, the likelihood that we're going to be featured on, CBS, apart from the Army Navy game and maybe the Commanders Classic, I don't think it's very high. And lo and behold, 2023 Army Air Force isn't even going to be on CBS. So, and Army Air Force, they do pretty good numbers. I mean, they've gotten over 1 million viewers the last few years. But even with that, we're not even going to get that on network this year. It's going to be on CBS Sports, which I like. I like CBS Sports. I feel like it's my kind of my home network. But what are our realistic expectations? Is, I think, maybe a better question.
Yeah, so I think that's a beautiful segue to our second topic. Very well done, Cuthbert. I really appreciate it. And also too, I mean it's also I also wanted to add this too. I mean, for I guess a fun fact, the most viewed NFL Network college football game. That's not counting the NFL Network does air the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic on Labor Day Sunday, but not counting those, Army UTSA in 2019 was the most highly viewed NFL Network college football game, topping out 169 viewers. So I guess NFL Network knew what they were doing. I mean, this is Army's third appearance on NFL Network, so great for that one. But yes, like back to Air Force Army. And again, like you mentioned the Commanders Classic, which honestly I didn't even know they're like doing the branding this year. I mean, obviously you see the pennant up on top of my head, I mean the branding for it kind of looks like I mean, yeah, the logo is shaped like a diamond. So I would think that I would think that the branding's like different, I mean, but if they're calling the Commanders Classic still, maybe there's a rebrand because the game's obviously not being played on a baseball diamond in Denver. But all goofiness aside, I think it's interesting what they're trying to make the Army Air Force rivalry into. Which like I mean, maybe it's not even like a problem with like what they're trying to make it into because I definitely feel like I definitely feel like Air Force would not want to have a 10 a.m. kickoff just to be on CBS. But I'm wrong because obviously they did that last year when they played Navy at home. They were a 10 a.m. local time kickoff, which I am just sure the cadets at the Air Force Academy just loved. But that's neither here nor there. But I mean, I guess I want to know your thoughts, and I guess like we'll just like kind of like talk through and
I'm
get like
I'll,
CBS.
I'll tell you, I'm really on the fence about this Commanders Classic thing. There are aspects about it that I'm on board for, and there's things about it that I just do not like. Um, I don't mind that it's called the Commanders Classic, that they want to kind of brand it. It's not, it doesn't particularly excite me or, disgust me. It's sort of like, okay, whatever you want to brand it. I know that now they've got trophy celebrations and stuff, and it's a little like this is feeling a little forced. The biggest issue for me is this is a rivalry that has always been home and home. I mean, unless in the whatever 1970s there was a one-off at the Rose Bowl or something that I'm somehow neglecting. This has always been a home and home, and I think there is something to be said for home and home rivalries. I love that the Army Navy game is played neutral site. I love that it effectively has always been neutral site. I love even more that it's neutral site and it rotates among a relatively small group of cities. That list has expanded in recent years, which I'm a little ho hum about for Army Navy. But regardless, um, I think I think this rivalry would be better served if it stayed as a home and home. In terms of dollars and cents, you're talking about, a guaranteed home sellout every other year. You've got the atmosphere of you're either at home and everyone is behind you, or you're in enemy territory. And you look at some of the really great college football rivalries, and there's plenty that are played at neutral site, and it's the same site every year, and those are all fine. But I love, say, for the Iron Bowl, where if it's in Tuscaloosa or it's in Auburn, it means everything to those teams, and it is war. You could say the same about Ohio State, Michigan, or any of the other really big rivalries that go home and home. And I think on balance, I like the feel of that more than, well, we were in Arlington, Texas, and now we're going to go to Denver. I mean, if you want to do neutral site, Denver's a little bit better than Arlington. I mean, I know that for recruiting purposes, both Air Force and Army are always happy to play more games in Texas for obvious reasons. But at the very least, if you're going to make it neutral site, at least try and make it like Army Navy, where the neutral site is within, relative geographic space of the schools. And maybe one year it's a little closer to one school, and the next year it's a little closer to the other. But by and large, it's still neutral site. Okay, one year we're going to have it in Chicago, and the next year we're going to have it in Pittsburgh. I don't know. I'm picking those cities off the top of my head. I would prefer this go back to being a home and home. I'm not going to make a federal case out of it. It's not the end of the world to me, but I like the idea of you are playing a rival and you are either in enemy territory or they are in enemy territory. I just think there's something fantastic about that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, well, I love neutral site games for sure. And for me, I think the Commanders Classic is more of like a kind of like check the box thing. I know I went to the inaugural one in 2021, and I mean, I thought it was cool and everything. I mean, something fell off. It was a bowl game, which I mean, I guess you're talking to the wrong guy because I absolutely love bowl games and the idea of bowl games. But I mean, it's like Army Air Force is not meant to feel like a bowl game. And I mean, I feel like this year definitely it feels more like an Air Force home game. But I mean, I guess you could make the case that it definitely is a neutral site because I escaped my name, Fort Carson. Fort Carson is about an hour away from Denver, so you definitely could have a strong army turnout out there in Denver as well as Air Force turnout. So I mean, that remains to be seen.
Oh, and I mean, 100%, 100%. But it would be disingenuous to say that the Army Air Force rivalry or frankly, the Navy Air Force rivalry is anything like Army Navy. It just
Yeah.
isn't.
No, it's
And
not.
that's not a slight on, any service academy. That's just the facts, because Army and Navy has a rich tradition, and it has a legacy. And, Army Air Force, they've only been playing since the early 70s. And it is a hated rival, at least on game day, a hated rival until we all get to play on the same team. But it's not the same. It just isn't. And I think because it's not the same, trying to make it the same sort of cheapens it a little bit. And look, I'm sure whoever it was who thought this up in a marketing room a decade ago or whenever they planned it out thought it's going to be great. We're going to call it the Commanders Classic. We're going to have logos. We're going to have merch. It's exactly like you said, it's going to be like a bowl game. Look, that's all well and good. I don't know how the two schools, how they sort of come out the other end monetarily in terms of is it a net positive relative to having a sellout every other year? I don't know. But for a school like Army that already has destination fans, anytime we can pack Mikey Stadium, that's a win. You know, it's I haven't looked into this, but I would wager if you looked at the last 10 sellouts in Mikey Stadium, more than half of them are going to be against Air Force. Maybe all of them are against Air Force. I don't know. But if you don't have a wellspring of local diehard fans the way a massive P5 school might have, then that one sellout against against a rival, those are the types of moments that help build programs. When you're a fan and you see 37,999 other people at Mikey Stadium all going crazy while you beat Air Force, that means something to fans. That means something to the players. It means something to the cadets. So, you know, everybody wants to make a buck. I get it. Maybe it's a boon for the athletic department. I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I'd like to see it go back to home and home.
Yeah, and so I think this is more so for Air Force in terms of in the past, like they've been burnt by not having games I guess neutral site, which like I just pulled up looking at 2013. There's still an article of when it was like I guess the context this article was published in 2015 when Air Force lost a home game to New Mexico against New Mexico, and they decided to play at the Cotton Bowl as part of the state fair. And so Troy Calhoun, was Troy Calhoun in his reaction. And so the article mentions that by deciding to keep Notre Dame Air Force at on campus, Air Force missed out on a $1.5 million boost in revenue as they only made 2 million in revenue from the game compared to the $3.6 million that was estimated that the Denver Sporting Commission would have paid them. So I really think it's Air Force trying to kind of like not get burnt again per se, because I got to think that the money's like I mean like Falcon Stadium is a pretty big stadium. I got to think that the revenue that I guess the Denver Sports Commission or whoever is asking for these games is probably a sizable amount. And also too, like considering that I think Air Force Stadium is getting renovated as well, so it's gonna be reduced capacity. So I mean, I got to think that they're getting paid a fair dollar. But yeah, I mean, it kind of like sterilizes the field rivalry. Like, because for me, I'll cite kind of like a weird example, like the 2020 game that was at Mikey after Army Navy. And I know that's a rare occurrence, with it being after Army Navy and deciding the Commander in Chief's trophy between both schools. But it's like that just felt with it being with the backdrop of Mikey Stadium, as the sun was going down. That just felt like a very special kind of experience, and like I mean, I wasn't there for that, but I mean, it was just like it's not really the atmosphere itself, but it's like the fact that the Commander in Chief's trophy stayed at Mikey, like at that time. So I mean, I gotta agree with you, even though I love neutral site games. And I feel like this is I guess a secondary effect of it being at a neutral site is I guess the promoters have a say, have most of the say in like what to I guess in terms of TV, because I can imagine the Denver Sports Commission or whoever whatever they're called told CBS and Mountain West like no, you are not going to mess up the tailgating environment and everything by having this game at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Like you're just not going to do it. So that kind of sucks for me because I always like telling people like, hey, like Army plays on CBS 2 times a year. Like this is great. Like, we're a nationally relevant program, but like now we just have Army Navy and it's, because it's Army Navy. So
Yeah, and I mean, I was looking into I looked just at a very shallow dive into some of the like attendance figures, and not that this is translating necessarily directly into dollars for the athletic departments, but in 2021, which was the first year of the neutral site, we were almost at 50,000, which is bigger than Falcon Stadium. It's bigger than Mikey. This is the first one and it's neutral site and it's never been done before. And that's great. And then last year, it went down to just shy of 44,000 in attendance. And you go back to pre-pandemic and, in 18 and 19, so 18 at Army and 19 at Air Force, both those games are sellouts. So, you know, you make a very good point about, what is the payday? Ultimately, a lot of this does come down to money. It does come down to we can't do this if we can't, fund this ourselves, if we can't provide, money for other programs. I don't know how much of that goes on at Army relative to other schools, but I think there is something to be said for the game day experience. And I think that experience benefits from either being at West Point or in Colorado Springs.
And I mean, I definitely agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Where you have the Corps of Cadets sitting behind the Air Force bench, like from my experience, and just cheering the Air Force bench, and the other way around too. For when it's at Colorado Springs, like you just don't really get that. You get like designated seating sections, where like the cadets are, maybe in one of the end zones, and Air Force is like in a corner of the other end zone or something like that. Like you just don't get that. And I mean. I'd be cool if like, they did Army ULM at Independence Stadium in Shreveport, which is close to, Monroe. That's cool and all because there's not really history and it feels like a special event, but with the history and everything that's at stake with Army Air Force, like a neutral site, it feels manufactured to say the least. That's really all I can say about it.
Well, and I mean, I listen, I'm talking out my rear here. I do not know what I'm talking about, but there is also part of me that wonders what type of recruitment considerations are being made in terms of trying to take advantage of a neutral site. You and I were joking a few minutes ago about playing in Texas, Air Force, Army, presumably Navy. I'm not positive. I know 100% for Army will never miss an opportunity to play a game in Texas because that is such a hotbed of recruiting for them. Going back to the first topic of discussion, an Army and a national schedule. And so not playing, the same, whatever, 8 to 9 or however many teams every year. Instead, we get to rotate, we get to really play a national schedule. I do think that probably does benefit us to some extent. I mean, as well as you can recruit to a school like Army. So, maybe there's larger forces at play here, and the Army football staff is quietly thinking, counting their blessings that they get to play a neutral site game and use that as a recruitment tool. Whether it's playing in the game or whether it's having recruits come to the game or just being visible and present in that area where you're trying to find recruits. I don't know. The Jeff Monken quote about this that I remember, this is, I believe, the prior to the 2021 game. It's the quote that I am sort of going back to in my argument, which is basically, you're taking away a home game every other year against a rival. You're taking away that atmosphere. And I don't know, as we've been sitting here talking about it, maybe I dislike the idea of the Commanders Classic more than I thought I did when we started. It doesn't get my blood to boil, but I do have a very definite opinion on it. I'll put it that way.
I mean, I guess we're on two different spectrums because, yeah, like I said, I'm Mr. Bowl Game. I mean, so any chance to get to see, especially one like I love ballpark football, but I mean, any chance like to see and like I was telling my friend, I'm like the Commanders Classic now it's like Army Navy out west because like for people stationed in not travel hubs like El Paso is far from a travel hub. Like, Army Navy becomes a pretty pricey venture compared to like, this
Oh
year for
yeah.
Army Air Force. All it takes is $102 Frontier flight. I don't need no bags. I was going I mean,
It's like, I'm there, baby. I'm there and I'm back.
yeah.
Easy peasy. No, I
So
listen, I understand 2024 Army Navy is going to be played in DC. I'm from Northern Virginia, suburban DC originally. I have 3 older brothers. We are already starting to plan for the 2024 Army Navy game because, just like you said, it's going to be an investment, and it's going to be an investment in time, logistics, and not least of all, money. So the ability to get more Army fans into a stadium at a neutral site, not the worst thing in the world.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, like with both our topics, drawbacks and benefits. Wherever you stand, there's arguments for both, really. So I mean, I guess that wraps a bow on that topic. I mean, Cuthbert, do you have anything you wanna plug or add? Not shamelessly, may I say, not shameless.
First of all, it's always shameless. I will say, if there's anybody who's still listening to this, the Last of the Hard podcast will be getting started back up this year. It was real big. Well, not real big. I should say it was real consistent 2 years ago. Last year, it was completely inconsistent. But my co host has now retired. So he's got nothing but free time on his hands. And I'm already actually starting to talk to some people who have different affiliations with the Army football program from years and years and years ago, and maybe have some guests on. And I've already started my prep work. So I'm looking forward to it. It's probably going to be a dumpster fire like it always has been, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And, so look out for that. And then obviously, SSN Army, Sidelines West Point. I run the account, and I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm actually on that account much more than my personal. So, look for me there or at Last Hard Podcast on Twitter.
Absolutely. And I mean, I always enjoy interacting with you on Twitter. I mean, which is how we got here to this point. And I'll be checking out the Last Hard podcast on commutes during game weeks for sure, because I mean, Lord knows I don't have time to like actually seek out and like read other, like actual analysis. I need to be kind of like multitasking to consume this, so I will
Well,
be
listen,
listening.
keep up the good work because I love reading your stuff. I love it on red shirts, and plug for, I guess, a competing podcast. As for football, as I mentioned, you broke the story about Army on the NFL Network. So keep up the good work because I love reading good writing about Army sports. And a tip of the hat to you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Really means a lot. I mean, I'm more of a college football writer than an Army homer. I try not to be a homer for my alma mater, but it's like it's hard sometimes.
And
It
you
is
call
hard.
yourself a fan, and you're not even a homer. You're not even a homer for the alma mater.
It's hard. It is hard sometimes, but yeah, thank you. I mean, I do appreciate the kind words. I mean, we're both putting in some good work for this program we love, and hopefully we'll be talking about some bowl games this year. I mean, yeah, I mean, Army Navy is amazing. It is a crowning achievement, but I mean, me, I love bowl games. So,
We'll be
hopefully in
back this
December
year. We'll be back.
we'll be
The
back. Yeah.
offense is going to be banging on all cylinders. There will be no bumps in the road as we transition to the gun option. We're going to take LSU to overtime. I'm calling it now. We are going to be at minimum an 8-win team, but I'm predicting we are going to be a 10 to 11 win team. I'm calling it right now.
All right. And I think that's a great note to end it on. We'll see if we have to wipe this footage from existence come December. But
I never said it. I never said it.
but until next time, thank you again, Cuthbert, for joining. Till next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.